"Move it, old man. You're blocking access." Some people have actual jobs to do. The voice, sharp and laced with arrogant impatience, sliced through the heavy air of grief. 82-year-old Arthur Jenkins, his worn suit hanging loosely on his frail frame, flinched. He'd been standing by the hearse, his hand resting on the polished wood that cradled his beloved Eleanor, trying to draw a steadying breath before they carried her to her final rest. Before he could fully process the command, a jolt of searing pain shot through him. His vision blurred, his legs buckled, and the cold, indifferent gravel of the cemetery road rushed up to meet him. The last thing he heard before the world momentarily faded was the crackle of the taser and the officer's contemptuous grunt. This was how he was to say goodbye to his wife of 57 years. If you believe that our elders, especially those who have served, deserve our utmost respect, comment, "Honor our heroes" below. Arthur Jenkins had always been a quiet man, even in his youth. When his shoulders were broader and his back straighter, he preferred listening to speaking. He'd enlisted in the Marines the day after his 18th birthday, a scrawny kid from a nowhere town with a fire in his belly and a fierce, unspoken loyalty to the flag. He'd seen things no man should see, done things that haunted the quiet hours of the night. But he'd served with a distinction few could claim, medals, commendations. They were all tucked away in a dusty box in the attic, rarely spoken of, rarely seen. After the Corps, he'd returned home, married Eleanor, the girl, who'd waited and built a simple life. He'd worked as a carpenter, his hands once adept with a rifle, now skilled with wood and nail. He was a man of routine, of quiet dignity, a pillar in his small community, though he never sought the spotlight. Now his pillar, Eleanor, was gone. The grief was a physical weight pressing down on his chest, making each breath a monumental effort. The cemetery was quiet, save for the hushed whispers of the few mourners who had gathered, old friends, a couple of distant relatives. The small, unassuming procession had just arrived at the gates of Green Hill Cemetery. Arthur had merely paused. Overwhelmed by a fresh wave of sorrow, his eyes fixed on the flag that would soon drape Eleanor's casket. A small comfort she, as a patriot herself, had requested. He hadn't even registered the police cruiser pulling up or the young officer, Miller, stepping out with an air of officious self-importance. Officer Miller, all crisp uniform and mirrored sunglasses, surveyed the scene with undisguised annoyance. A funeral? Yes, but that didn't give these people the right to block the service road. He had a schedule, patrols to make. He saw an old man, hunched and slow, seemingly oblivious to his presence. "Sir, you need to move your vehicle and clear this entrance," Miller called out, his voice devoid of any sympathy. Arthur, startled, turned slowly. His eyes, red-rimmed and unfocused, struggled to meet Miller's. "Eleanor," he began, his voice raspy. "We were just—" Miller cut him off. "I don't care who Eleanor is. This is a public thoroughfare. Move the hearse, and you step aside, now." The funeral director, a kind man named Mr. Henderson, hurried over. "Officer, please. We were just about to proceed. If you could give us a moment." Miller held up a hand, silencing him. "I'll give you 60 seconds. Then I start writing tickets. And you—" He jabbed a finger toward Arthur. "Get out of the way." Arthur, still dazed, hadn't moved. He was trying to process the aggression, the sheer callousness of the man. He just wanted to be with Eleanor. He took a half step toward the hearse, again, a primal need to be near her. "That's it," Miller snapped. "You're obstructing. I told you to move." He grabbed Arthur's arm. Arthur, frail but with a spark of old Marine stubbornness, instinctively pulled back. "Don't touch me," he whispered, the words barely audible. That was all the provocation Miller needed. He saw defiance, not grief. He saw an old man challenging his authority, resisting an "Officer!" Miller barked, his hand going to his belt. The sequence was horrifyingly fast. Mr. Henderson cried out, "Officer, no! He's an old man. His wife—" But Miller wasn't listening. He unholstered his taser. The mourners gasped, a collective intake of horrified breath. Arthur, seeing the weapon, froze. His mind, already clouded with sorrow, couldn't comprehend the escalation. He saw the yellow prongs, the menacing glint of the device. "Final warning," Miller shouted, though Arthur was making no aggressive move. He was simply standing, a statue of grief. The crackle hiss of the taser discharging echoed unnaturally in the somber silence of the cemetery entrance. Arthur's body convulsed. A choked cry escaped his lips as 50,000 volts coursed through his aged frame. He crumpled to the ground, his head narrowly missing the sharp edge of the curb. His glasses flew off, landing lenses down on the gritty asphalt. The world went dark. For a moment, then swam back in a haze of pain and unbearable humiliation. He could taste blood from where he had bitten his tongue. His chest ached, not just from the taser, but from the crushing weight of this final indignity on the worst day of his life. Officer Miller stood over him, the taser still pointed. "Should have complied," he said, his voice tight with adrenaline and a perverse sense of justification. "Nobody is above the law." The mourners were in shock. One elderly woman, Eleanor's closest friend, began to weep openly. Mr. Henderson rushed forward. "Shiorti, what have you done? He's an old man. This is his wife's funeral." Miller waved him back. "Stay back, sir." He was resisting. "The situation is under control." Under control? Arthur lay on the cold ground, his body trembling. The smell of ozone, sharp in his nostrils, his heart, a frantic drum against his ribs. He tried to push himself up, but his limbs felt like lead. The pain was immense, but the shame was a deeper wound, a corrosive acid eating at his soul. For what felt like an eternity, Arthur lay there. The sky above was a pale, indifferent blue. He could hear the distressed murmurs of his friends, Miller's sharp commands to keep clear. The officer was on his radio, reporting the incident, his voice officious and self-important, painting Arthur as non-compliant and obstructive. Each word was a fresh stab of injustice. Arthur closed his eyes. He thought of Eleanor, her gentle smile, the warmth of her hand in his. He had wanted this day to be about her, about celebrating her life, about a dignified farewell. Instead, it had become a spectacle of brutality and disrespect. He felt a profound weariness, a desire to simply let go. The birds in the nearby trees continued their oblivious song. A distant siren wailed. Perhaps an ambulance Miller had deigned to call. The seconds stretched, thick with tension and sorrow. Then a new sound began to penetrate the haze of Arthur's pain, a low, rhythmic rumble, almost imperceptible at first, then growing steadily louder, more insistent. It wasn't a siren. It was deeper, more resonant, a vibration he could feel in his bones even through the unyielding ground. The mourners, too, began to look around, their expressions shifting from distress to confusion. Officer Miller paused his radio transmission, his head tilting. The rumbling grew into a distinct, powerful thrumming, the sound of heavy engines, many of them, approaching fast. The sound was unmistakable now, a deep-throated chorus that spoke of power and precision. Heads turned toward the main road leading to the cemetery, and then they saw it, rounding the bend. Not one or two, but a convoy of olive drab. Military vehicles, Humvees, troop carriers, and at their head, a gleaming black staff car with official flags fluttering from its fenders. The procession was long, stretching back down the road, an imposing display of military might. They moved with a disciplined uniformity that was both awe-inspiring and slightly intimidating. The convoy slowed as it approached the cemetery gates, the lead vehicles pulling to the side of the road with practiced efficiency. Officer Miller stared, his mouth slightly agape. His local police cruiser suddenly looked very small, very insignificant. What in God's name was this? A training exercise? A dignitary's escort gone astray? The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. The staff car came to a halt directly opposite the hearse. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, ramrod straight, his uniform immaculate, adorned with an array of ribbons and stars that denoted high rank. General Marcus Wallace, commander of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. His face, a mask of stern authority, surveyed the scene. The grieving mourners, the hearse, the agitated local cop, and then his eyes locked onto the figure on the ground. General Wallace's steely gaze, accustomed to commanding thousands, narrowed instantly. He saw the discarded glasses, the frail body, the distinctive cut of the old suit, now dirtied with gravel. His expression, initially one of formal inquiry, shifted to disbelief, then a flicker of horrified recognition, quickly suppressed and replaced by a cold, gathering fury. He strode forward, his boots crunching decisively on the road. 2 highly decorated Marines, his aides, emerged from the staff car and flanked him, their expressions mirroring his grim resolve. Officer Miller, flustered by the sudden appearance of such high military authority, stepped forward, attempting to regain control. "Sir, this is a restricted area. I am Officer Miller, local PD. We have a situation here." General Wallace didn't even glance at him. His eyes were fixed on Arthur, who was slowly, painfully trying to sit up, aided by Mr. Henderson, who shot Miller a look of pure contempt. "Sarge?" General Wallace's voice was low, but it carried the unmistakable timbre of command. "Arthur Jenkins, is that you?" Arthur blinked, his vision still blurry. He recognized the voice, a voice from a lifetime ago, a voice that had once rallied men in the face of death. "General Wallace?" he managed, his own voice a hoarse whisper. Wallace was at his side in 3 quick strides, kneeling beside him, his usual formidable demeanor replaced by a look of profound concern and something akin to pain. "What in the 7 hells happened here, Arthur?" he asked, his voice gentle but edged with steel. He carefully helped Arthur into a sitting position. It was then he saw the telltale marks of the taser prongs on Arthur's suit and the raw, red skin beneath. A muscle twitched in Wallace's jaw. He looked up, his eyes like chips of ice, finally settling on Officer Miller. "Officer," Wallace said, his voice dangerously quiet, "explain yourself now." Miller, visibly unnerved by the general's presence and the accusing tone, puffed out his chest slightly. "Sir, this man was obstructing a public thoroughfare and became non-compliant when I instructed him to move. He resisted when I attempted to escort him aside. I was forced to deploy my taser to subdue him." He tried to sound professional by the book. General Wallace rose to his full height, towering over Miller. The sunlight glinted off the stars on his shoulders. "Obstructing, non-compliant, resisting," Wallace repeated, each word slowly, as if tasting something foul. "This man," he said, his voice now rising, resonating with controlled anger, "is Sergeant Major Arthur Jenkins, United States Marine Corps, retired." A collective gasp went through the mourners. Several of the Marines from the convoy, who had dismounted and were now standing in a silent, formidable line along the road, visibly stiffened. Their eyes, already hard, seemed to bore into Officer Miller. "Sergeant Major Jenkins," Wallace continued, his voice now ringing with a fierce pride that was a stark contrast to his anger, "served this country for 30 years. 30 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. He fought at Khe Sanh. He was one of the chosen few. Do you even know what that means, officer?" Miller's face began to pale. He stammered, "Sir, I had no idea. He didn't identify himself as—" "Identify himself?" Wallace cut him off, his voice like a whip crack. "He was trying to bury his wife, you damn fool. He was grieving." He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "This man wears more valor on his little finger than you've seen in your entire life. The Navy Cross, 2 silver stars, 3 Purple Hearts. He dragged 3 wounded men, myself included, out of a burning Huey under heavy fire in '68. Saved our damn lives. If it weren't for Arthur Jenkins, I wouldn't be standing here today." He took another step, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "And you—" His eyes locked onto Miller's. "You tasered him!" The general's voice dropped again, but it was filled with a chilling intensity. "You put your hands on a hero of the Republic on the day he lays his beloved wife to rest." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the quiet weeping of Eleanor's friend. The weight of the general's words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Officer Miller looked like he was about to be physically ill. His eyes darted around seeking an escape, but he was surrounded by the accusing silence of the mourners and the stony-faced Marines. "Do you have any comprehension, Officer Miller?" General Wallace's voice was low, seething, "of the sacrilege you have committed here today?" Miller swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sir, I was following procedure. He seemed agitated." "Agitated?" Wallace almost roared, the sound making Miller visibly shrink. "His wife of nearly 60 years is in that hearse, the love of his life. What kind of heartless automaton are you?" He gestured toward Arthur, who was now being gently helped to his feet by 2 young, powerfully built Marines from the convoy. They handled him with a reverence that was a stark contrast to Miller's earlier brutality, as Arthur stood, unsteady, but resolute. Every Marine in sight, from the general's aides to the toughest-looking sergeant in the convoy, snapped to attention. Then, as one, they rendered a sharp, precise salute, not to General Wallace, but to Sergeant Major Arthur Jenkins. The gesture was so powerful, so full of unspoken respect, that tears welled in Arthur's eyes, tears not of pain this time, but of overwhelming, unexpected gratitude. He tried to return the salute, his arm trembling, but General Wallace gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Easy, Arthur, easy." Wallace turned back to Miller, his face a granite mask of contempt. "Your procedure has just brought disgrace upon your uniform and your department. You assaulted a decorated veteran, a man who has given more to this country than you can possibly imagine at the lowest moment of his life." The general's radio operator, a young corporal, stepped forward. "Sir, local dispatch is on the line, and the chief of police is en route. Priority." Wallace nodded curtly. "Tell the chief I will expect him here in person, and Officer Miller." His eyes pinned the now sweating, ashen-faced policeman. "You will remain here. You are not to leave. You will answer for this." Miller could only nod, his authority stripped away, his arrogance replaced by a dawning, sickening understanding of the magnitude of his misjudgment. The street, moments before a scene of quiet grief and then ugly confrontation, was now dominated by the quiet, disciplined power of the United States Marine Corps, all there for one. Man Officer Miller had dismissed as just some old-timer. The arrival of the police chief was swift. Chief Thompson, a man who knew General Wallace by reputation, looked aghast as the situation was relayed to him, first by a tight-lipped Wallace, then by a stammering, barely coherent Miller. The chief's face grew progressively darker with each detail. He listened to Mr. Henderson's account, to the quiet, dignified testimony of Arthur Jenkins himself, who, bolstered by the presence of his fellow Marines, recounted the incident with a painful clarity. There were no histrionics, just the simple, devastating truth. Officer Miller was immediately relieved of his weapon and badge and placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, though the grim set of Chief Thompson's jaw suggested the outcome was a foregone conclusion. "General, Sergeant Major," Chief Thompson said, his voice filled with sincere apology, "on behalf of my department, I am profoundly sorry. There is no excuse for what happened here. This is not what we stand for." General Wallace gave a stiff nod. "See that it's handled properly, Chief. This kind of disrespect for our veterans, for any citizen in mourning, is intolerable." With Miller dealt with, the atmosphere began to shift. The Marines, under Wallace's quiet direction, formed an impromptu honor guard. They respectfully cleared the way for the hearse, their presence lending a solemn dignity to the proceedings that had been so cruelly shattered. General Wallace himself walked beside Arthur, a comforting hand on his elbow, as they finally escorted Eleanor toward her resting place. The remaining funeral service was imbued with an unexpected poignancy and a profound sense of honor. As the flag was folded and presented to Arthur, it was General Wallace who made the presentation, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke the traditional words. Arthur, frail but standing tall between two young Marines, accepted it, his tears flowing freely now, mingling with those of the other mourners. Tears of sorrow for Eleanor, but also of gratitude for this unexpected, powerful show of brotherhood and respect. The young officer who had so callously dismissed him was gone, replaced by a sea of comrades who saw not an old man, but a hero. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across Green Hill Cemetery. Eleanor was at peace. Arthur Jenkins, surrounded by men who understood the true meaning of service and sacrifice, felt a measure of solace he hadn't thought possible an hour earlier. Officer Miller faced a swift and decisive internal affairs investigation, leading to his dismissal from the force and a public apology from the city council. The incident sparked a local review of police training with a new emphasis on de-escalation and community respect, particularly for vulnerable populations like the elderly and veterans. General Wallace ensured Arthur was not left alone in his grief. Marines from the local reserve unit checked in on him regularly, helping with chores, sharing stories, or simply offering quiet companionship. The bond, forged in the crucible of war and reaffirmed by an act of senseless disrespect, had, in its own way, brought healing. This story is a stark reminder that heroes walk among us every day, often unseen, often unassuming. They are our fathers, our grandfathers, our neighbors. They carry the weight of their service silently, seeking no special treatment, only the basic dignity afforded to any human being. We must never judge by outward appearances, for the quietest souls may possess the deepest courage and the most worn hands may have performed the greatest deeds. The value of a life, the measure of a person, is not in their current circumstance or their visible strength, but in the content of their character and the legacy of their actions. Let Arthur Jenkins's ordeal and the ultimate vindication he received serve as a testament to the enduring power of respect and the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood. May we always remember to honor those who have given so much, and to look beyond the surface, for true worth often lies hidden, waiting only for a moment of recognition to shine forth. If you believe in the power of respect and the importance of honoring our veterans, subscribe to Hidden Sparks. Share this story if you think true heroes deserve to be recognized always.